Welcome to another episode of MiniGrinder Paints. I am your host, but who else would I be? On this show, we will be painting Velmarius Elazarin, sculpted by Julie Guthrie for Reaper Miniatures. As you can see, we'll be painting this guy as sort of a celestial sorcerer. If you're a follower on my Facebook or Google Plus page, you would see that I recently painted a miniature with a very similar paint scheme. Wizards, mages, sorcerers, and those wearing robes in general make great candidates for large canvas space. And in this space, you can do some really amazing things. Exhibit B. For these celestial sorcerers, I pick a nebula and use that as inspiration for the design on the robes. The inspiration for these robes came from the iconic Orion Nebula. This imagery is just astounding. I clearly cannot claim creative rights to this. So I hope you join me as I paint Reapers, Velmarius, Elazarin. So for this paint scheme, we're going to need some pure black for some tonal control. Same thing with the pure white. And that goes for the stone gray as well. The skin will be base layered with dark skin, and then I'll have a top layer of tan skin. Finally, we're going to highlight with some fair shadow. The iris color is going to be imperial purple. Golden blonde for the hair. And the nebula itself will involve a mixture between aged bone, some blood red, some marigold yellow, and some imperial purple mixed with some brilliant blue. We're going to get right into it, and we're going to go straight for the robes. I start there because I'm going to be gesturally painting the nebula onto the robes. And I don't want to have to worry about painting around the sash or any other details. So my first layer is going to be my background layer. I've got some blood red, aged bone, and pure black down on the palette. And I'm beginning to establish a color gradient from dark black around the hood and cuffs of the robe down to that kind of mauve-y color. There really is something to color matching. I suggest using a palette. Now the paint here is not thinned, actually. You can also establish a smooth color gradient by painting on wet paint. It really does help blend those two colors together in a nice seamless fashion. We're going to start at the brightest spot of the nebula, at the core of it, with some aged bone. We're going to establish another color gradient with a mix of aged bone and blood red, kind of a pinkish color. And we're going to draw that down into a pure blood red. Take a look. Again, I'm just using some unthinned paint. Just trying to dirty it up a little. You can see that by adding just a little bit of pure black, I was able to tone down that blood red. The Orion Nebula is kind of a big bubble of awesomeness, where all the cool stuff is happening on the inside. So to create that depth of field, we're going to first outline that pink blotch with some pure black. Let's not forget that little ribbon of dark nebula that sort of trickles up into the core. Now we're going to establish the top layer with that same mix of aged bone and blood red. You can see now how those outer clouds sort of frame a window in which to peer into the nebula. Now we're going to add the outer glow, which is somewhere in between a purple and a blue. So I got brown blue and imperial purple. And sort of a dry brushing fashion, with the paint lightly loaded, I'm just going to lay that color on the outskirts of the nebula. For this, I'm using ever so slightly damp brush. This thins the paint and will allow you to create a subtle shade. Taking that mix and brightening it up with the aged bone. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight the top layer that frames the nebula with that mix. Okay, even brighter with the pure white. Taking the dirty brush. And the nebula's got a little bright buddy that sort of hangs out up here. Maybe that's like Papastar or something. I start with a light basing with that same mix, that cloudy color. And then I go and highlight it with some marigold yellow. Just gonna brighten it up just a tad more. I'm going to go around with some pure black and clean up the edges. I'm going to go back into the inside of the nebula and create kind of a dynamic color gradient with the marigold yellow. For this, I'm using a damp brush to thin the paint. A thin paint leads to a transparent layer that lets those colors underneath come through. Next, we're going to give Papastar some shine. For this, I load my liner brush with some thin white paint. Some choice stars. I want kind of big. And there's these two. Bigger one. Let's not forget our buddy up here. It seems like a fine place to live. I'm going in and adding some more shine to the choice stars. I'm stroking with the brush radially outward from the center of the star. The reason is that, generally speaking, the end of your stroke is visibly thinner than the beginning of your stroke. So here's our parent stars, nicely shining. We're just going to add some more stars. Little guys. Now to create a depth of field with the stars, what I do is I use some straight white to create some brighter stars, and then I go back in with some thin white and create some dimmer stars. And I gotta say, it looks awesome. Check her out. Just fantastic. Alright, so the scarf now, it's on the back and around the neck. We're going to go ahead and base that with some pure black. For this base layer, the brush is well loaded. Okay, scarf is base black. The boots are base black. Sash is base black. Tunic is base black. While I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and hit up these hammer pants with some stone gray. I'm going to follow it up with a highlight of pure white mixed with a dirty brush. Often when I'm highlighting, I look at where the light is already highlighting the topology of the surface. We'll get that silvery color in. We're just going to take some straight white and some nice shiny MC hammer pants. I'm going to go in and line the scarf with a base layer of stone gray on both sides. And then, much like how I did the pants, I'm going to go back and highlight with some pure white, and that'll give it that shine. That shine right there, that's what we want. All you need here is a light touch, a thin paint. Get some stone gray, but we're going to tone it down with some pure black. We're going to use that to highlight that sash. We'll also use it to highlight the boots. I found it extremely difficult to do the eyes while on camera, so I went ahead and did them off camera. My typical algorithm for doing eyes is to first paint the whites, like kind of an off-white. I don't worry too much about painting outside of the eyelids, because I'm going to cover that up later. After the whites, it's off to the iris. A double dot will do ya. If you're really brave, a black dot for the pupil and a white dot for the eyeball glare. Okay, it's off to the skin, starting with a base layer of dark skin with a well-loaded brush. Alright, so now we're going to top layer the skin with some tanned skin. When it comes to the face, you got to be careful. You can't just slab your paint down. In fact, it's more of a shading process. So with some thin paint, you want to slowly build up that top layer of color. And take care to avoid the nooks and crannies. It's those areas which will give definition to the skin. We're going to highlight with some fair shadow. And on the hands, hit the knuckles. Some golden blonde for the hair. For the base, I kind of want to do a 3-tone cobblestone. Start with stone gray, and I darken it up with some pure black, and I lighten it up with some aged bone, and that's my 3 tones. Next up, I'm going to hit it with kind of a dirty dark wash. Picking up some of this dark brown. Once you like the color, pick up a drop of water, mix it in, you got your wash. I'm going to let that dry. I've actually gone back in and added some cracks into the cobblestone. It's a nice touch. It's looking great and all, but the final step. We're going to go ahead and add some shading to the robes. Thin out this black to a wash. Basically doing some shading. The great thing about shading with a wash like this, it's easy to wipe away your mistakes. See that? Just keep on building up the shadows until you're happy. Getting pretty happy right now. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this episode of MiniGrinder Paints. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. If you want to see more of my celestial sorcerers, you're going to want to stop by my Facebook or Google Plus page, MiniGrinder Studio. If you'd like me to paint one for you, you can check out my artist commission prices at BigDwarfGames.com. I went ahead and started a Patreon campaign, so if you can, check it out. I'd like to take these videos up a notch, but for that I need your support. Regardless of the Patreon campaign's outcome, I'm going to continue to make more videos. So please, stay tuned. Lastly, I just wanted to take the time to thank everybody for liking my videos and subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it, and it truly motivates me.